Today's session is real-world tips for data governance in Power BI and Microsoft Fabric. It's actually a repeat of a session that I presented a couple of times at the Gartner Data and Analytics Conference in both Orlando and in London. And due to a reception we got from that, we thought we would put it on as a webinar so you could join in and have a look if you weren't there. So a bit about me before we start. My name's Alex Whittles. I'm the founder, CEO, and principal consultant of both Purple Frog Systems and Power BI Sentinel. Purple Frog I founded 19 years ago, which is a company that specializes in providing advice, consultancy, design, implementation, support, and maintenance of Microsoft data analytics solutions, Synapse, SQL Server, Fabric, Power BI, machine learning, etc. Then Power BI Sentinel is a second company that I started really as a direct result of our larger enterprise customers from Purple Frog wanting and needing better data governance, better transparency, better visibility of what was happening inside their Power BI environment. So I have one foot in both camps, and I can pretty much go in any direction with any questions that you have. I've been a Microsoft Data Platform MVP for about 10 years now, and I'm one of only 10 Microsoft Fabric MVPs in the UK. My LinkedIn link is on the bottom, so if you want to connect, then please do feel free. So today's session is not a sales pitch for Power BI Sentinel. It's about providing some guidance on how you can structure and plan your Power BI estate to get better control of it. Information, techniques, and tips and tricks on how you can plan it better, structure it better, and keep some control. So a lot of the information you'll get you can use straight out of the box today. But obviously later on I'll be showing you how Power BI Sentinel can dramatically simplify and speed this up for you and take away some of the pain of doing that. As I mentioned, I presented this at the Gartner Data and Analytics Summit in both Orlando and London this year. And so some of the content I'm going to refer to is from those Gartner conferences. So to start off, we need to start with a very, very important concept, requiring a shift in mindset and perception of what data governance is. All too often we hear governance is about blocking things, stopping staff from accessing data. We shouldn't think of governance about restricting staff, but about empowering staff. If you've got effective controls, auditing, and trust in your platform, you can let people loose with it. You can let people access the data, safe in the knowledge that the right data is being made available, only the right people have access to it, and their activity is being logged and monitored. At the Gartner event, Georgia O'Callaghan, one of the Gartner consultants, presented a session on governing self-service, and she reported that by 2027, Gartner predicts that 40% of CDAOs will have rebranded data governance as a key enabler of strategic business outcomes. Governance is about enablement, adoption, and trust. It's not about blocking people. The downside, as we all know, is implementing governance is an expensive, time-consuming headache that's very, very hard to do. Well, hopefully in this session, I'm here to dispel that myth and show you that actually it's not that hard to get started. You don't have to do everything all at once on day one. You can cherry pick small components and gradually evolve and iterate your environment. So within the Gartner DNA conference, they do a bake-off where they compare various different tools against each other and highlight strengths and weaknesses. And from last year's bake-off, the key strengths of Power BI were second to none. It was obviously very, very well praised, but there's an absolute key challenge and gap in the Power BI platform, which is content governance. And when I talk about Power BI, I do refer to both Power BI and obviously now Fabric, because that exists in the same environment. So I'll use those two terms largely interchangeably throughout this session. And content governance it's a key piece of the puzzle that turns a very good tool into an enterprise grade tool, one that you can trust with your critical business information. And without governance, there's a lot of key challenges. And that's critically why we created Power BI Sentinel, was because of this lack of built-in governance support within the Power BI portal. A lot of things you can do, but they're very time consuming, as we'll see later on in this session. So first of all, why is data governance important? Why should we deal with this? Why should we worry about this? And let's look at four key areas. Information security. Whether your organization is aligned to SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, DORA, GDPR, whatever your industry's or your organization's information security framework, you cannot hide from data governance. You absolutely have to take information security very, very seriously. If you don't, if you're not certified through ISO or SOC 2, you still have a legal obligation for GDPR compliance. And so it's vital that you actually get some kind of control of understanding what information is being used in your organization, where it's going, and who's got access to it. Now, all too often, we see organizations put a huge amount of focus and energy on their operational database systems, their CRM, their ERPs, their SAPs, their SQL Server, Oracle databases, etc. Because those are the critical systems that run the business. All too often, we see a critical gap where data analytics, whether that's in Tableau or Power BI or Click or Excel, is just ignored and not really embraced as part of their information security framework. I know because we've been audited to ISO 27001 for the last 3 years. And it's an area that auditors don't often seem that knowledgeable about inquiring about. It's very easy to let it slip through the net. So obviously, to me, Power BI and Fabric is actually one of the most important platforms to focus on information security, because it's the place where all data from all of your source systems around the business congregates and gathers into one single place. And if you've got a single point of risk in your business, that's where it is. We also need to ensure trust that the right data is being used. The right data from the right source, it's being cleaned correctly and consistently. You've got consistent KPI definitions so that when your business users look at reports, they know they can trust the data or the result and the information that it's providing. If you don't have buy-in, trust, and confidence from your staff, from your team, why are they going to be using your Power BI reporting? They're going to be doing it themselves in Excel, and that makes matters 10 times worse. So in order to really increase adoption, you need to make sure they have confidence in the reports and data that you're showing. There's only one thing worse than not having reports available, and that's having incorrect reports. Having reports that are out of date or have incorrect calculations or pull data from the wrong source, pulling data from someone's spreadsheet rather than from SAP, for example, because then you're exposing reports that people think they trust, but actually they've got old, stale, out of date and inaccurate information. And they're then making business decisions based on those reports, based on that information. And those business decisions may be flawed. And that creates a significant business risk. There's also a business risk for data exposure. If anyone's been following the challenges with Marks and Spencer's, a big retail chain in the UK recently, their recent information security breach is estimated to have cost them in the region of £1/3 billion in lost profits, all through information security or lack of information security processes or gaps in their procedures. And of course, there's one that interests everybody, and that's cost saving. How can we monitor our license usage and capacity usage to reduce costs, to save money where we can? But it's not just about cost saving. It's also about monitoring adoption, monitoring the return on the investment. If you can increase adoption and increase consumption and utilization of your Power BI and Fabric estates, you get much better value for money. You're increasing the return on investment. You can justify the cost. You're not going to be forced to try and save money on reducing your capacities and licenses because you can show they're providing genuine business value. So cost savings and FinOps is about reducing costs, but also justifying the costs and proving that it's helping transform the business. So let's start with information security, because that's obviously one of the most critical components of this. And whether you look at SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, they all are founded on three core columns and principles of confidentiality, integrity, and availability of your data. The foundational pillars of all information security framework systems. And so if we look at confidentiality, for example, it starts with security. Have you locked down your data to make sure only the right people can access the data they need? You don't want to give everyone access to all your data, all your information. According to Gartner, 15% of data breaches are due to being over permissioned, users having more permissions than they need. And 50% of data breaches involve insider threats within an organization. So the first thing you need to do to reduce your risk of information security breach is to adopt the principle of least privilege. Shrink down your permissions, make sure only people that need access to that data have access to that data. The next stage of it is auditing, is monitoring who's doing what. Yes, that involves consumption, who's viewing reports, but it's also about who's exporting, who's sharing externally, who's creating, deleting, editing, changing information, content, and reports. Having an audit trail so you can piece together the picture of what has happened in your environment. To extend security into admin rights, not everybody needs to be an administrator. So shrink down the permissions as much as you can to make sure that people who only need to view content have viewer. Only those people that need to change content have enhanced permissions. And then to expand on the auditing side, high risk activities are critical. Monitor who's exporting, sharing, and performing activities that potentially could compromise the data in your estate. The next pillar is integrity, making sure the right data is being made available. If you've got multiple different reports that all pull data from different places, then when various members of your board get together and each look at their own reports, if they don't match, if they haven't got the right source data, if they don't have consistent calculations, KPIs, and cleaning, they're all going to be getting different figures on what our sales were last week, what our profitability was, how many customers we have. So making sure the right source data is used as the correct source for a particular semantic model or report is critical, but also the KPI calculations, data cleaning, and the exact data that's being used is consistent across all of your reporting. Then we have to make sure that the reports are up to date. There's no good looking at a report that's a month out of date or a quarter out of date. It has to have as up to date data as you can, as live as is possible. That may be hourly, maybe daily, maybe weekly. Make it clear to your users what the refresh frequency is of this data. What is the timestamp of this data? When was it last refreshed? Is it a week old? Is it a day old? Is it a month old? Have that on the front page of your report so users can see how up to date that data is or how stale it is. And all of this feeds into trust. They need to be able to trust the data they're seeing in these reports. And the final pillar is availability. There's no point in building a business critical reporting infrastructure if it's going to go wrong. If reports aren't going to be available when they're needed, if it breaks, if people don't have access to what they need. So make sure you have some kind of backup process in place to be able to back up your Power BI reports, semantic models. So if there is a problem, if someone deletes a report, then you can resurrect it and redeploy it. When we think about disaster recovery and backups with an on-prem database, Oracle SQL Server perspective, backups and disaster recovery fall into two camps. Infrastructure problems, where a server fails or a hard disk fails, and then you're backing up your people. What if someone deletes something or changes something incorrectly? Part of using platform as a service, software as a service of Fabric and Power BI is that Microsoft take care of the infrastructure, disaster recovery and availability for you, but they don't back up your people. If someone comes in and deletes something, that's your issue, not Microsoft's. So how do you protect yourself against bad actors or people clicking the wrong button? Also monitoring refresh failures. This goes back to the up-to-date data and the integrity side of it as well, of monitoring carefully what's working and what's not working in your environment, and having a process to rapidly monitor, identify those failures and fix them to make sure that your data is then up to date. There's a number of single points of failures within Power BI. For example, personal workspaces. If people are using personal workspaces and hosting business critical reports in personal workspaces, then if their account gets deleted, if they leave the organization, or if they go on vacation, no one can access those reports. no one can change them. No one can do anything with them. So avoiding personal workspaces, personal gateways is exactly the same. There's a lot of areas where you're building a reliance on one person being there, available with their laptop turned on to make those reports work. Remove those before a failure happens, and that will increase the robustness and reliability of your estate. And the final point in availability is expose your reports to the right audience. This is, I suppose, the opposite of where we started on security. Security is about restricting permissions. Right audience is about expanding your permissions. It's not just about shrinking down all the time. There's no point having a report if your users can't access it to help them make valuable business decisions. So, principle of least privilege, yes, it says reduce permissions, but reduce permissions to those who need access to the report. And if people who need access haven't got it, there's no point having the report. So do look to see whether you can expand the audience as well to increase the business benefit. So all of these, you may look at this and think, well, there's too much there to tackle. There's a lot there to worry about in my environment. How do I actually get started? You do not need to do everything all at once. Start with some low-hanging fruit. Start with a small area. Cherry pick certain things you can look at to try and improve your information security posture. And every single small change you make will iteratively combine into helping improve your governance approach. So let's take one of the most critical important features, which is security, and see what we can do about that. And there's a load of ways you can think about this to really help yourself. First of all, let's think about workspaces. Workspaces. They are the absolute most important units of security and management and control of your Power BI and Fabric estate. Everything sits in a workspace. And we see far too many estates with workspace sprawl, where people just create workspaces at will. There's thousands of them. They're not governed, they're not managed, they're not planned. And it becomes a management headache. So think of a workspace as a critical component that allows you to manage the governance of your estate. Don't allow users to create their own workspaces. They should be done centrally. And insist that every workspace has a clearly documented purpose, contents, audience, and owner. What is the purpose of this workspace? Why are we creating it? Why can't it fit into another workspace? What is the reason for this workspace being in existence? And that should include what content it's going to have. What data should it contain? Should it contain sales data, profitability, finance data, HR data, etc., product information? Define the scope of data that workspace should be able to contain. And also the audience. Who is this designed to be used by? It could be a department, it could be a project, it could be a level of management. Who is the purpose? And so you may end up having multiple workspaces for finance. They all contain, they all have a finance as the audience, but maybe finance directors and then finance bookkeepers are different audiences. And therefore, they're going to contain different level of data contents because they have slightly different purposes. And the final point is the owner. So if you're managing a growing Power BI estate centrally in an organization, you can't manage every workspace yourself in a small team. You need to be able to delegate management of workspaces throughout the organization. So once you've defined the purpose, content, and audience of a workspace, also define an owner who is responsible for maintaining that workspace, the health of it, the contents of it, reviewing it, shrinking it, archiving content, managing permissions, etc. And that allows you to more effectively manage the self-service sprawl within your organization. The next area is entry groups. Try and avoid allocating permissions to individual people. I know it's very easy to do that, but what's easy now makes a long-term management headache. So if you can create an entry group or Active Directory group that aligns with your with your Power BI workspaces, assign access to those groups. That means you can dramatically simplify the onboarding of new staff, because you can just clone another user and their entry groups will give them access to the right reporting. They're not going to have to wait weeks or months to get access individually to each workspace. But also, as members of staff move around an organization, it's much easier to look at the list of entry groups and remove them and add new ones. And then the reporting just flows through from that, rather than having to go through every workspace manually changing that user. And that dramatically reduces the management overhead of your Power BI and Fabric estate and allows your Power BI and Fabric management team to really focus on growing your Power BI estate, not managing it with permissions. And then I mentioned on the previous slide about permissions using the right role. Not everybody needs to be an administrator. Determine what they need to do. Are they a viewer? Are they a contributor, a member, or an admin? They all have different levels of access. Only give out the level that they need to do their job. You may want to temporarily increase their permissions to do one job, and then you can reduce it again afterwards. And that helps protect against people sharing incorrectly or doing things they shouldn't do, accidentally deleting content, etc. Where you have a report, in some cases, you may want people to be able to see the entire report. But in a lot of cases, you may want them to see part of the report. Take a sales report. You've got regional managers in the north, east, south, west regions of the country. You could have a single workspace and a single report, but use row-level security to say when the northern regional manager logs in, he can only see the northern sales. When the southern manager logs in, she can only see southern sales. So use one report for multiple purposes, and row-level security enforces who can see what. And it's no good just implementing this. You have to review, you have to constantly monitor and then reduce those permissions. As people's work roles change, as the content of the workspace changes, review and monitor who has access to what and reduce it down to adhere to that principle of least privilege. The problem with doing this in Power BI is that Power BI management is all workspace centric. You can only view content and audit logs and information about permissions on a workspace by workspace by workspace level. And that's why it takes such a long time to manage Power BI, because there's no global monitoring or global administration to help you with this. So do this, but I'm fully aware it's not as easy as it could be because of the workspace centric nature of the Power BI management. So let's talk about trust. How can we increase the level of trust in our environment with our reporting? We can start with a very, very simple concept that is incredibly powerful: promoted and certified datasets. And when I say dataset, I mean semantic model, etc. Two words for the same thing. So when a developer creates a report, they can deploy it to your Power BI portal, and it just goes into the list with thousands of other semantic models and reports that are available in your environment. And so then a self-service user comes in and tries to build their own report based on some existing data. How do they know which data set to use as a source for that data? They may have 20, 30 data sets that all contain sales data. Which one is the right one to use? And what happens is they'll pick one that they think is right. More often than not, it's the wrong one. And so then you get inconsistent data. So as a developer, after I publish a data set, I can just flag it as being promoted. And all that does is it puts a little flag against it so that when a self-service user searches for a semantic model, the promoted data sets bubble to the top and become the prioritized ones. So it just helps users find the right data sets to use. It's very easy to do, very quick and very effective. There's another level beyond that called certified. Now, only a Power BI administrator can set a certified flag on a data set. These are your crown jewels. These are your single source of truth, the ones that really are the primary corporate primary data sets for the core reporting in your business, the ones that have been created by the expert Power BI development team in your organization, by your IT team, those that have been tested thoroughly and are used for the board reporting packs, for example. So you can then a Power BI admin can set a certified data set, and that then bubbles to the top even higher than promoted. So it's a way of helping guide your users to the right data without having to for them to come and ask you every time. The next level is sensitivity labels, which are a lot more complex to implement. And these are not a Power BI feature. They're an Office 365 feature. So it covers Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, and Power BI. And it's a way of configuring a policy across your organization where you can say, have certain labels that can be applied to documents or data. Is it public? Is it organizational? Is it departmental? Is it private? Is it encrypted, for example? And then you can apply these to documents, to Word, Excel, PowerPoint, but also to Power BI datasets. And that helps users understand how potentially sensitive information is, but also it can be used to prevent exporting of data, printing, etc. Do not try and apply sensitivity labels as a Power BI or Fabric project. It has to be an Office 365 project because it does impact the whole organization. But make sure when that's being done that Power BI is brought into the conversation to make sure that's included in the implementation of sensitivity labels. And the final element of trust is deployment pipelines. Don't change production reports. Have a development and a test workspace and a production workspace. For those really important reports, have a test area where you can make a change to a report, changing DAX calculations, changing Power Query, etc. Test to make sure it works okay. Does it still give the same results as your production report? Power BI has a built-in feature called deployment pipelines, where you can daisy chain these and link these workspaces together. Make your changes in your dev workspace. Once the developers are happy, they can promote those into UAT or test. Then either the same people, or ideally you've got a testing team, can then test those reports and make sure they work correctly and they're happy for those to go in production. When they're happy, they can then promote those into production. So it's a way of making sure that critical reports are not just ad hoc randomly changed with breaking changes identified before they go into production. You can also extend that further by using apps. We thoroughly recommend not actually giving most users access to workspaces, but grouping reports together into an app and publish the app, because that gives you an extra level of testing as well and detaches the visual report in the app from the visuals in the workspace and gives you an extra level of testing in there. So the next area we'll look at is data lineage. What data is coming from where to where? Now, the pictures you can see on the screen are a screenshot from the Power BI portal, where you can look at a workspace, you can change the view to the lineage view, and it will show you a really nice view of your source, whether it's websites, SQL servers, APIs, coming through semantic models, going into reports, going into apps, etc., and dashboards. And it's a very, very nice way of looking at a report and seeing where does this data come from. There's two perspectives of how you can look at this. One is I want to see a report. Where's my data coming from? And in that view, this view is very, very useful. Slightly more importantly is looking at data exposure, data risk, and impact analysis. I'm going to be changing this API, or I'm going to be changing this database, or this view or store procedure in this Oracle database. Which reports are going to be impacted? Or where's my data exposed from potentially a GDPR perspective? And that's where this built-in Power BI view falls over, because it is only one workspace at a time. And certainly if you've got an ERP or a CRM, they're going to be used across multiple workspaces. And there's no way within Power BI of seeing the holistic enterprise-wide view of your data lineage. And that's why it can be quite time-consuming in powerbi.com to actually view data lineage. And that's where external tools can significantly help. So the final area that we'll look at is training. If you don't have external tools to help manage and monitor, you're really relying on the train and trust model of educate your users on what to avoid to try and minimize risk and hope that they're going to honor that. So there's a few key things here. There's avoiding personal workspaces, avoid personal gateways. Those are the single point of failures. When that person leaves the organization, anything using those personal workspaces or gateways is going to fail. Always keep a copy of the PBIX. If you develop a Power BI report, don't just deploy it to the service and lose a copy of the original. Keep a copy of the original in OneDrive, Dropbox, SharePoint, wherever it may be. Use the certified promoted model flags, as we discussed earlier. Very quick and easy to do. Educate people to start using that to help themselves. And make sure whoever's being delegated to own a workspace manages and monitors the dataset refresh failures. Those are the top 5 things I would say to really focus on in training to help maximize your ability to govern and manage your estate. The problem is standards slip over time. Staff change, people are busy, lots of other priorities. It's very easy to train people on this, but they almost certainly will stop doing it unless you have a way of monitoring what they're doing and reinforcing those requirements. And that's really where you have to rely on external tools to help you. And there are a number of tools that are available. So if we look at Power BI built in for a start in the first column, yes, as we've seen, it has limited data lineage, workspace at a time. It does have some auditing. You can see using the report usage metrics report who's consuming a report, but only in one workspace and only for 30 days. Doesn't tell you who's deleting, editing, exporting, sharing, etc. Doesn't talk about Fabric at all. It has limited disaster recovery, as we've talked about with the deployment pipelines, but there's nothing really to help you with FinOps, security, trust, risk assessment, etc. If you want a more powerful data lineage view, then Purview in the second column is Microsoft's answer to this, which isn't just a Power BI and Fabric tool. It's an enterprise-wide tool that covers everything that you have in your estate, whether that's Azure, whether that's AWS, GCP, on-prem. It'll monitor data across your entire estate from a data lineage perspective and a sensitive data perspective. But it is a very big, powerful tool that takes a lot of resources to set up, maintain, manage, use, and benefit from. Pretty much the same as non-Microsoft equivalents, Atlan, Informatica, Elation, etc. All corporate data governance tools that really are not data governance tools, they're data lineage tools that show you what information's going around. And they all focus on your entire enterprise, but they have a very light touch on Power BI. They will say what data is ending up in Power BI, but they don't cover anything else about the auditing, disaster recovery, FinOps, security, etc. So you can't use those in isolation. Next, if we look at auditing, how do we start monitoring things in more detail in Power BI? Well, Power BI has an API, as does Fabric. And so you can access the audit logs through PowerShell if you roll your own solution, or you can use tools like Fwarm that does a similar thing. And the audit log is accessible. It's not the easiest of things to use, but it's available to you if you want to roll your own solution. Then from a disaster recovery, Power BI Desktop does now integrate with Git. You can save, instead of saving your report as a PBIX, you can save them as a PBIP, which is a project file. And that makes Git or source code integration much, much easier. So where you've got developers that understand Git, understand source control, your central core power users, then I think Git's a very, very good answer. Where it falls down is your self-service users, your power users out in departments. You're never going to get someone in finance or marketing really knowing how to use Git, how to use source control. So it's not a global solution, but it's a solution for your core central reports. So there's only really one tool that can tick all of these boxes out of the box, and that is Power BI Sentinel. So I want to talk you through a couple of slides and screenshots of how Power BI Sentinel helps you with a few of these items to give you a feel for the kind of capability that you get out of the box. So the first screen we'll look at is the data lineage. Now, Power BI Sentinel is a software as a service system that takes about an hour to get set up, and then export all of its findings into a database that you own and control, and all the results are published into a Power BI report that exists in your environment. So this report you can see on the screen now will be your Power BI report hosted in your tenant that you can change, update, investigate, etc. And you own the database behind it with all the information that's in there. So this is the data lineage view, where we can see on the decomposition tree on the bottom right, we've got, for example, all of our SQL Server sources, not just the databases, but the actual tables that are used within those databases. DIM date, fact internet sales, DIM product, same as store procedures or functions. We can see for a particular table or view which workspaces it's exposed in or it's used in, and then which semantic models and reports. And all this is obviously interactive as per any other Power BI report. And this isn't just for your data governance team. It's also used by your developers. So they get a feel for, okay, well, I want to change this store procedure or this view. What's the impact going to be on workspaces, semantic models, reports, and users? So it really is a tool for everybody to be able to use. On the left, you'll see the navigation pane. You'll see we've got about 18 different pages of information within the Power BI Sentinel governance report. There's a lot of detailed information in all of those, but we summarize them all into a nice simple dashboard highlighting the key components of your confidentiality, integrity, and availability to align with your ISO 27001 and SOC 2 audits. So this gives you a score on each of those three that you can very easily show to your InfoSec team to show how your score is improving and the impact of all of your hard work managing your Power BI estate. Each one of these has a drill through into one of the more detailed pages that show you some of the recommendations behind it to help not just tell you what's wrong, but to give you guided recommendations on how to fix it. Going back to Georgia's session at the last Gartner DNA Summit, her final takeaway was the critical piece of the puzzle that she sees in almost every self-service reporting environment is monitoring. It's monitoring where things are going wrong to drive the process of fixing problems. And this really is what this report is about. It's about that monitoring aspect to guide you through to the most important things that may need to be resolved. So let's take a look at one of those, for example, which is going to be the audit log. This shows you a full audit log of every single activity that's happened in your organization, whether it's creating, deleting, editing, sharing, committing to Git, adding ML experiments, creating fabric components, etc. Both personal and shared workspaces across your entire tenant. So you get a full audit log of exactly who has done what in your environment. So let's take a disaster recovery plan scenario where someone's told you a report's been changed and is broken. Well, this will tell you exactly who changed it and when. Then if we go to our Power BI Sentinel portal, you can choose for a particular report any two dates and run a comparison between them. And it'll give you a nice simple comparison of what changed between those two dates. Here we've got a measure change at the bottom, for example. Or we click on the details and it will show us what the measure was and what it is now. So you now know who changed it, when, and what they changed. And then, of course, Sentinel takes automated backups, so you can then roll back to that backup as well. Now, this is all without the user knowing this is even happening. There's no Git or source control involved. It's all fully automated behind the scenes for you. So it's corporate wide. So let's look at some of the recommendations that Sentinel can offer. This, for example, is the user permissions recommendation. And Sentinel takes a look at all of the activity that your users have been doing over the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months and reconciles that against the permissions they have in each workspace. And it's able to then give a recommendation engine in this suggested action column in the middle. Over whether you can downgrade that user to a different permissions level and still allow them to do all the functionality they're currently doing. And this is obviously by workspace, by user, and by entrant group as well. Sentinel knows members of groups, so it can work through group membership into actual individual user permissions and activity. And so Sentinel doesn't make the change for you. It's here as a recommendation engine to give you a nice, simple action plan of, I need to go away and fix this. I can review them, you can reject them or accept them, and then go and make those changes yourself. And of course, this is updating every day. So every day you'll get a new version of this to help keep you on top of it. This comes back to the point about principle of least privilege, trying to reduce those 15% of data breaches that are due to misuse of privileges and being over-permissioned. This is your solution to that. Next up, we'll do the same thing, but for licensing. We can look at, again, all the activity for a particular user. We can look at the license level they've got of Power BI Pro, Free, Premium per user, Fabric, etc. And then look to see whether they are actually using the licenses they've got. So they may have a Premium per user license, but they actually only need a Pro. Or they've got a Pro license, but they're only accessing Fabric workspaces and they only need a free license, for example. So this gives you a recommendation on which licenses you can downgrade to save some money. all part of that FinOps process. We can then do the similar thing with premium capacity, looking at the level of activity that goes on within each workspace within a premium capacity, and giving you an approximated apportionment of cost per workspace. Excuse me. So you can start to assess which workspaces are costing you the most money, where you may have noisy neighbor syndrome, where you may need to move a workspace to a different premium capacity, or even down to cross-charging, for example, between departments. Now, these screens are only a small fraction of what Power BI Sentinel can do, but hopefully it gives you some insight into the kind of capability that the tool can do, and how it can dramatically speed up getting to a point of control, management, and confidence that we talked about in the earlier slides. To quickly demonstrate some of the business impacts of this, I've got a couple of case studies from some of our customers. This one customer, for example, is a retailer with over 1,000 stores. They're able to remove over 500 users from workspaces that had permissions that you weren't using them. 72 workspace permissions downgraded to different levels of permissions. We found over 20% of their environment, of their Power BI reports and semantic models weren't being used. So they can be moved into an archive folder, archive workspace to simplify, streamline, and clean up their estate. We found a couple of dozen reports that were failing to refresh on a regular basis, causing that trust issue. So we're able to focus their attention on those reports, get those fixed, and increase the quality of their reporting. And then from a financial perspective, over half of their PPU licenses weren't being used. They didn't need them. And a third of their pro licenses. So a big cost saving from that perspective. And then from a risk perspective, we identified 15 personal gateways that were in use by over 100 reports. So straight away, identify those, move them, put them on a shared gateway to avoid that problem happening in the future, to prevent the issue, preventative maintenance. And on the risk side of things, we found that over 7,000 reports have been exported in over 3 months. There was a culture of a certain couple of departments exporting everything to Excel. And of course, from a data management perspective, that you lose all visibility and control of data once it gets exported and shared. So identifying those users, identifying the departments, and being able to apply some training was critical to reducing the risk, the ongoing risk in their data. In the second case study, this is a leisure organization with a couple of hundred locations around Europe, and very similar picture. 73 users removed from workspaces, a number of workspace permissions downgraded, a third of their estate in terms of reports and semantic models were not being used. But actually a big win for this customer, we were able to show that every single semantic model was refreshing correctly. The quality of their work was very, very good, and they were able to use this to justify that. But a big issue with their licensing, they were dramatically over licensed. 74% of their licenses weren't being used. And then from a risk perspective, someone had left the ability to create Fabric content turned on without them realizing. And so there were 4 users going to town creating Fabric assets, lakehouses, warehouses, pipelines, notebooks, without them knowing. And when you're trying to manage consistency of your data engineering environment, you need to know who's doing what. And Power BI Sentinel was able to monitor that and show them exactly what was going on. And also from the tenant settings, external data sharing was turned on. And so people were able to share data externally without any extra authorization. So we were able to turn that off very, very quickly. And also from a trust perspective, we found loads of inconsistent KPIs. The same measure name, but different reports having different calculation logic. So once you can identify these, you can target their development team to go and fix the things that need fixing and make dramatic improvement in the health of their overall estate very, very quickly in a matter of days. So to summarize, how do you have an effective governance plan? You have to have a plan. You have to have a plan of the things we talked about at the start of this session. A plan for your workspaces, a plan for permissions and security, and you have to implement that plan. But that's where most organizations stop. And that's a critical failure, because then you end up in the new version of Excel hell, which is Power BI hell, and soon to be Fabric hell. The only way of avoiding that is to have an effective monitoring strategy. When you can monitor it, you can monitor adherence to that plan, you can identify those gaps, you can identify the problems, and then implement fixing. And if you don't have that monitoring layer in place, you've got no ability to fix, unless you just have a lot of resource who can spend all of their time just randomly looking for things and hoping to stumble upon a problem. And that's the criticality of that monitoring step. Without that, your plan gets further and further, or sorry, reality gets further and further away from that plan as time goes on. So with that, I will say thank you very much for attending this session. Hopefully that's given you some insight into how you can better manage, plan, and think about your Power BI and Fabric estate. We do still have a quarter of an hour left on this call. So if you do have any questions, then please do feed them in to the Q&A portal. We do have one question already. Can you provide month to date, year to date cost split by workspace in a single premium capacity? Great question. Right. So workspace capacity management is somewhat of a challenge at the moment because Microsoft don't currently make available any detailed CU consumption metrics. What we can do though is use the CU pricing, so the premium pricing screen that we showed earlier. That's all derived from the audit log as to monitoring who's done what in your Fabric and Power BI estate. So absolutely, you can use that same data that exists in your database to analyze that consumption over time, even down to looking at dataset refreshes. How long does a refresh take? How much time is it taking of your capacity per refresh? And then bubble that up over time to monitor consumption per hour, per day, per week, per month, per year. And that will keep growing in your audit log for as long as you keep the audit log active. From the moment you turn Power BI Sentinel on, it will go and get the last 30 days of audit log, and it will keep building from there. So the longer you have Sentinel turned on, the longer a period you can analyze that consumption and that cost metrics across time. To the Q&A portal. We do have one question already. Can you provide month to date, year to date cost split by workspace in a single premium capacity? Great question. Right. So workspace capacity. Next question is, can you share pricing details of Power BI Sentinel? Absolutely, yes. We are very transparent with our pricing. I'm just going to load up a web browser, bear with me a second. And so if you go to powerbisentinel.com, we can then look at the pricing page. And we have two different pricing tiers, core and enterprise. Core is designed for smaller organizations. For Power BI, enterprise brings in Fabric functionality and is designed for larger organizations. So if we look at enterprise, for example, then the pricing tiers are based on how many reports you have in your estate, how many PBIX reports. So it starts out at £9,500 a month, a year, sorry, or $12,500. But it does depend on how many reports you have in your estate. If you let us know the details of your estate, then we'll happily work with you to give you more detail about the pricing tiers and capability. As far as the limitations, we're really limited by the limitations of the Microsoft APIs. So Power BI Sentinel sits there and monitors all the APIs from your Fabric and Power BI estates, and therefore we rely on Microsoft providing those APIs to give us the information. So as soon as Microsoft make further functionality available, then we bring that into Sentinel. And it doesn't just take the API and give it to you in your database. We do a lot of curating, transforming, cleaning, and enhancing of the data before we push it out into a really nice clean data model into your database, so you can access with SQL queries, Power BI, etc. So as far as limitations, one of the key ones at the moment that we're really waiting for Microsoft to sort out is much more detailed, granular view of Fabric consumption metrics. So we're keeping fingers crossed that's going to come to us soon. And as soon as that's there, we'll bring that into the product and then expose it in your database as well. It's a constantly evolving platform. The functionality in Fabric never sits still. It's constantly changing. Fabric, although it's still quite a new product, is Microsoft's fastest ever growing data analytics platform in their history. So that shows the level of adoption Fabric's getting, and that's driving a lot of the API work to make it more enterprise ready as well. Good question. Next one, where do you store the data about auditing, backups, and tracking? That's stored in your database. So you create an Azure SQL database. Very soon, that will also be able to be a Fabric SQL database as soon as that comes out of public preview with Microsoft. And once Sentinel creates this picture of what's happening in your estate, it exports that back into your database. So you own that, you control it, and you can use that for any purpose you want, whether it's using the Power BI template report that I showed you today, or whether it's querying it yourself, putting machine learning on top of it, building your own reports. It's up to you. Next one, where do you store the data about auditing, backups, and tracking? That's stored in your database. So you create an Azure SQL database. Very soon, that will also be able to be a Fabric SQL database as soon as that comes out of public preview with Microsoft. And once Sentinel creates this picture of what's happening in your estate, it exports that back into your database. So you own that, you control it, and you can use that for any purpose you want, whether it's using the Power BI template report that I showed you today, or whether it's querying it yourself, putting machine learning on top of it, building your own reports. It's up to you. Next one, where do you store the data about auditing, backups, and tracking? That's stored in your database. So you create an Azure SQL database. Very soon, that will also be able to be a Fabric SQL database as soon as that comes out of public preview with Microsoft. And next question, do you have an architecture and security diagram that we can share? Yes, absolutely. I won't put that on the screen now for the recording, but if you drop an email to hello@powerbisentinel.com, then I or one of my colleagues can email that security document over to you. That gives you a bit of an architectural view on what's where. But as a high level, we've got our Sentinel processing cluster, which is a cluster of virtual machines and services in Azure that monitors your APIs, pulls out the metadata, transforms it, cleans it, and pushes the result back into your database that you own. If you wanted to take backups, then it will take a backup and push that into an Azure storage account, again, that you own and that you control. You're in control of this all the time. It's your data. And then, are there things the Sentinel needs access to outside of Power BI, to do a full lineage? So there's the Power BI APIs, there's the Fabric APIs. The only extra one is with permissions in Power BI and Fabric. Permissions are granted usually, as we talked about earlier, to Entra groups. So in order for Power BI Sentinel to be able to look at that group, work out who the members are of that group, and reconcile that with the actual users to give you the recommendation engine for permissions, we need to access your Microsoft Graph API to get a list of group members. Now, that is never stored on the Power BI Sentinel side of the world. It's only ever gathered and exported directly into your database. So the two are joined together within the Power BI report that we give you that runs on your database. But that's the only other API that's needed. Apart from that, it's just the Power BI admin and Fabric admin APIs. But also there's some features that may need the non-admin APIs as well. We can also support a service principal, and so all of your APIs can be scanned using the service principal for added security if you want. Another great question. Keep them coming. These are great. Right. Currently have Sentinel. Excellent to hear. Notice that some users are being flagged for downgrades to a free license. Okay, can we clarify how those recommendations are determined? Are they based on user activity? Yes, exactly. So what do you need a pro license for? You need a pro license to consume content in a shared workspace, or to consume content in a Fabric capacity that's F32 or lower, or to deploy changes to reports. So we scan the activity log for any of those activities, and obviously it changes by workspace depending on the nature of the workspace, and then work out what what license is required for that level of activity. As soon as a user changes or deploys a Power BI report in a shared workspace, we'll say they need a pro license to do that. Obviously, if you upgrade a Fabric F32 workspace capacity to an F64, that then changes the mix because suddenly you no longer need a pro license to consume. You can get away with a free license to consume. So we monitor both the activity, but also the particular workspace and then premium capacity that that activity belongs to. What time frame is that activity being evaluated? That's up to you. When you load our Sentinel governance report template, there's a number of parameters that you can set on the template. One is the source database server and database name. And the other one is how many days you want to include in that report, and it will bring in the audit log for that number of days. I think the default is 60 or 90, I can't remember, and that will be the data that's used for these calculations. But if you change that parameter to 30, 60, 90, 120, it's your shout. But also, a lot of these things are DAX calculations that exist in that report. So if you want to change the logic, you're more than welcome to. We give you these templates as a starting point, and if you want to take a copy of the report, change the DAX logic, change the Power Query to bring in a fixed amount of history instead of a parameterized, you're more than welcome to. Great stuff. Next one. Can PowerBiSentinel access personal workspaces? That's a great question. Or is it just the group apps? Unfortunately, personal workspaces are off limits. Microsoft do not make personal workspace contents available through the APIs. There is no way of accessing those for anything. And so whatever goes on, also whatever content is in personal workspaces, I'm afraid we have no way of seeing that. However, personal workspace activity does come through in the audit log. So if you turn on the audit log, you can then use that to build a picture of how much activity is going on, and it gives you the report name and the workspace name for users in their personal workspaces. And so you can use the audit log to infer a list of activity and therefore content of what's in each workspace. Critically, are people trying to share personal workspace content with other users? It'll show that as well in the audit logs. So not directly, but going via the audit log, you can build your own picture of those personal workspaces. Similar with personal gateways, Microsoft provide no visibility of personal gateway usage. However, Power BI Sentinel looks at all of the reports that use a gateway. It reconciles that against the list of shared gateways that are in use, and it infers from that a gap analysis between the two to work out what it thinks a personal gateway is, and it presents that as a list to you. So we're able to do a lot of clever work beyond the APIs to infer a lot of these potential problems and show you those in the reports to give you a lot more capability than would be available directly out of the box, directly in the APIs. And that's the value of having a lot of this API information being cleaned, transformed, and put into your database, is that if it's too complex a query for a Power BI or DAX, you can write a SQL query against your database to do very, very complex tasks of analyzing the content of your estate. And I'm pretty sure you've got some very, very good T-SQL coders in your environment. Let them loose to the database and they can get you an answer to anything you want. Obviously, if you need any help with that, we're here to help as well. We can help you write a query that will get you the answer that you want for anything. Some great questions. I think that was the last one. We do have a couple of minutes spare, so if you do have any more questions, please throw them in. In the meantime, our email address is on the screen, help@powerbisentinel.com. Our domain name, powerbisentinel.com. There's lots of information about how to set up Power BI Sentinel, how it works, etc. Any other questions, please do feel free to. Obviously, if you need any help with that, we're here to help as well. We can help you write a query that will get you the answer that you want for anything. Some great questions. I think that was the last one. We do have a couple of minutes spare, so if you do have any more questions, please throw them in. In the meantime, our email address is on the screen, help@powerbisentinel.com. Our domain name, powerbisentinel.com. There's lots of information about how to set up Power BI Sentinel, how it works, etc. Any other questions, please do feel free to. Obviously, if you need any help with that, we're here to help as well. We can help you write a query that will get you the answer that you want for anything. Some great questions. I think that was the last one. We do have a couple of minutes spare, so if you do have any more questions, please throw them in. In the meantime, our email address is on the screen, help@powerbisentinel.com. Our domain name, powerbisentinel.com. There's lots of information about how to set up Power BI. Drop an email to that address. One more question. Do personal workspace reports count towards report for pricing? No, they don't. Because we can't back them up, document them, manage the lineage on personal workspaces, we don't include that in the pricing. We only include for pricing the workload that Sentinel actually does, which is your shared workspaces and your premium and fabric workspaces. Drop an email to that address. One more question. Do personal workspace reports count towards report for pricing? No, they don't. Because we can't back them up, document them, manage the lineage on personal workspaces, we don't include that in the pricing. We only include for pricing the workload that Sentinel actually does, which is your shared workspaces and your premium and fabric workspaces. Drop an email to that address. One more question. Do personal workspace reports count towards report for pricing? No, they don't. Because we can't back them up, document them, manage the lineage on personal workspaces, we don't include that in the pricing. We only include for pricing the workload that Sentinel actually does, which is your shared workspaces and your premium and fabric workspaces. Drop an email to that address. One more question. Do personal workspace reports count towards report for pricing? No, they don't. Because we can't back them up, document them, manage the lineage on personal workspaces, we don't include that in the pricing. We only include for pricing the workload that Sentinel actually does, which is your shared workspaces and your premium and fabric workspaces. Do we have any metrics regarding on-prem gateway usage to check if it's overloaded? There's two answers to this. One is yes, we can show you exactly what is being processed through a gateway in terms of the number of dataset refreshes, which databases they're hitting, what tables they're hitting, how long it takes, when they're being hit, what time of day, so you can see if there's a heat map of gateway activity. So there's a lot of information already in Power BI Sentinel that can tell you when a gateway is likely to be under its maximum load and which database systems it's hitting, which workspaces and which reports. There is also another tool, I can't remember the name of it, but I'm sure it's on GitHub. There's a tool that you can download and run on your gateway server that will monitor the actual gateway app, get a hold of the gateway logs, and then upload those to an Azure storage account for you. And that's a good way of getting access to the actual specific logs of exactly which SQL queries are being run at what time. So if you've got a particular performance issue, then I'd recommend getting a hold of that tool to really monitor the specific detail of what a gateway is being asked to do. But how do you find that? Well, you start out with Power BI Sentinel, which shows you the duration, which semantic models are being refreshed and when, what gateway they're hitting, etc., which kind of points you to a direction of where there may be a problem, and then you can use more detailed auditing tools like that to go into more depth. Right, we have hit the top of the hour. We have used up the full hour. So thank you so much for all those amazing questions. And thank you all for joining us today.